I'm a little early for the show. This week, we have Mehdi Rais. He's a maverick, a game changer. He was working for the corporate world until he finally decided that he wanted more. He wanted to change the game, and that he did. Let's go meet him. Welcome to the Rami Magic Show. How did I get here so fast? That's the magic trick. I'm not a magician. I'm a mortgage broker. I do magic with numbers. I read policy, and I set you up in the best position possible. Today we have Mehdi Rais. He is a powerful man. He started a company from scratch that is essentially a courier service for pharmaceutical products. He was in the corporate world and made a decision to change, made a decision to do something that he is passionate about. Finally, let's meet the man, the powerful Mehdi Rais. How's it going?
Good, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. You're only the second guest on the show.
That's a great number to have.
Yes, absolutely. What is RX on Wheels?
RX on Wheels, in simple words, is your Uber for pharmacy. So as you know, a lot of industries have adapted to the new world of today, which is, I like my food, I go on my app, I order it. But one of the industries that always stayed a little bit behind, actually still using fax until today, I think it's one of the only industries I know that still uses fax, was pharmacy. So how does a pharmacist manage their deliveries was always, I call them pre-BC era.
Yeah.
So that's where RX on Wheels came in play.
Okay. And essentially what you do is you deliver drugs to patients.
Exactly.
And those patients can track their drugs on the web.
Correctly.
Okay.
So just as they would order their food or they would order any other item that is traceable live, that would be applicable to their medication as well.
So it's essentially COVID proof, right? In the sense where people don't have to leave their homes. They can just can they order the drugs online and then receive it a few days later, or how does that work? Like, how does the prescription, how do you match up the prescription to the client receiving the drugs?
It's a very good question. So in Ontario, due to legislations, it's the pharmacist that has to be the manager of that prescription delivery. In other provinces across the country, the ability to be able to scan your prescription into a system that is then processed by a pharmacist and delivered to you without you having to get out is available in other provinces. Ontario is trailing a little bit behind. However, there are new innovations that have been approved by Health Canada that are coming that will enable us in Ontario to process the same type of workflow you described. Okay. So essentially a patient would scan in their prescription, select the pharmacy, and then have that medication delivered automatically. Okay. Now, in some other provinces or parts of the world, that is already a common practice where a patient would simply scan their prescription. A pharmacist will do a video call with them, have the counseling session done online, and then automatically have their medication delivered. We're just a little bit behind that in Ontario. Yeah. So for now, the pharmacist has to be the one initiating the prescription delivery for that patient. Then we'll enable the patient to be able to track that delivery as they're at their home, at their office.
Okay. Let's talk about that a little bit later. Sure. You took a risk of moving out of the corporate world, and you are one of the founders of RX on Wheels. What is your position with RX on Wheels now? Are you the president?
Correct. So I started RX on Wheels when I was still at my corporate world job.
Okay.
I thought about it as a great idea to help pharmacists move to the new era.
And a lot of startups actually begin that way too.
Yeah.
Right? They have a full-time, sorry to cut you off, Mehdi, but they have a full-time job, and then they start working on that side hustle until the side hustle is enough to get them to move out of the corporate job and just continue building the side hustle.
Correct. For me, it was a little bit different. I would have liked it to be that way. However, the way it all unfolded was a little bit different. I founded the idea. I thought it was an amazing idea. I saw the need. I saw the niche for it. And then I wanted that to be taken care of by someone else, one of my friends.
Right.
So that didn't pan out to work as well as I thought it would, which led me then to decide to take the risk and leave my corporate job to take on this full time.
Right.
Some people might have called it uncalculated risk.
Yep.
I called it passionate risk.
Right.
Because then you're really leaving a zone of comfort to really take a challenge head on.
Yeah. How do you see risk? Like what's uncalculated risk for you? Because obviously, I look at RX on Wheels and I love the concept. Hopefully we're going to have this conversation next year and it'll be a lot bigger than what it was. But I mean, how old is RX on Wheels?
RX on Wheels, as far as operations are concerned, began in April 2020.
Okay.
Now, the company or the development of the software behind it took about a year. Okay. So there was a lot of development, proof of concept testing.
April 2020.
2020.
Oh, okay, the development before you got to that point.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So there was a lot of test and error before, a lot of proof of concept done behind the scenes, tweaks, kind of going back to the market, asking a bunch of pharmacists about their opinion. So there was a lot of work done before we went live.
Okay. So again, how do you see risk? Like, what is an uncalculated risk to you?
An uncalculated risk is one that you wouldn't be able to project what is your option number B would be.
Right. Okay.
At some point, you would have option number B. And so for me, when I say it was uncalculated risk, I personally had an option number B, C, and D. However, in the eyes of whoever sees that entrepreneur idea going out, it could not be seen that way.
So you had backup plans.
Of course.
But you never want to execute the backup plans, obviously. Nobody does.
Absolutely. Okay. For me, they're far-fetched, way behind any possible concrete action being done on them.
And that takes a lot of resilience, right? And we talked about that last week, how important resilience is to an entrepreneur's life. What do you think you learned that resilience? Like, what makes you an entrepreneur? What made you want to be an entrepreneur?
I think the number one thing is really taking control over what can or cannot be accomplished. One big term for me that I think and lead with it is accountability. You know, when you're working for someone, you can only grow as much as that company allows you to. When you're out there, if let's say your idea or your venture does not move forward, yes, there can be some exterior factors that didn't allow you, but ultimately it was you. Right. There is nobody else to blame but you if it succeeds or you if it doesn't.
So you have to have the capability to just accept responsibility.
Absolutely.
Accept accountability and continue to move forward.
Absolutely.
We talked before the show about how sports teach that. You know, I played football. I played American football. Not professionally by any means, but that's the sport that I had played and coached. And I learned a lot of teamwork. I learned a lot of accountability. And I held my players accountable for their mistakes. And we had a lot of successful teams that way. And I think sports is something that is extremely important to the development of anyone, okay? Whether it's an individual sport or a team sport. You also played sports. You played soccer.
Yeah.
And you were held accountable by your coaches. You were held accountable by your teammates, right? Soccer is, 11 versus 11. So you make a mistake, the entire team will feel that mistake. Ultimately, how important do you think sports are to an entrepreneur's development stage?
I think it's almost like the first steps of a baby if you want to get into entrepreneurship. There isn't a whole lot of education curriculum oriented activities that people can do when they're growing up, except sports, to really set the tone of how can you be responsible, how can you be accountable, what is that drive is to want to win.
Right.
I think sports teach you that.
It's just a different type of learning. And, I think, going to university teaches you a lot of accountability, teaches you a lot of, it teaches you how to be resourceful. That's one thing that you probably don't learn in sports. But ultimately, a lot of entrepreneurs that I have spoken to come from an athletic background, they're not maybe not most athletic in terms of physically athletic, but come from some type of sport that has helped them develop those skills. and that's a key factor. You see risk as just to paraphrase, you see risk as, as long as you can hold yourself accountable, understand what your vision is, and even if you have a backup plans to whatever it takes, not execute those backup plans, essentially. At a younger age, we were talking about how you had a life-threatening accident, right? I've spoken to a lot of people that have had those types of life-threatening accidents or an illness, and that changed their perspective on a lot of stuff that they knew now, okay? Has it changed yours?
It for sure has. I was fairly younger, maybe
Yeah.
18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
And when you go through an experience like that, you don't necessarily understand the heft and the impact of such an experience on your life at that specific point. You're just happy to kind of get good and out of it, and you're safe and sound. And afterwards is when you really reflect back on it and you realize I was lucky.
Right.
I was lucky.
Yeah.
How many people weren't that lucky, right? But it takes a time to kick in. It's like it's an after effect of it that takes a long time for you to really absorb.
What was the first thing you did after that accident?
Funny enough, it was a motorcycle accident.
Right.
So I won't go into the details too much, but essentially, motorcycle accident, but a little bit. It was about in April. I got out of the hospital. I was lucky enough, nothing broken, just some skin burns. After a week, I was already on a new motorcycle.
Okay.
For me, that was instrumental.
Yeah.
That was
absolutely.
instrumental.
Right.
To not let that define your fear of things.
Yeah.
And if that happened, it could have happened to anybody else, and it could have happened to me in even worse case scenario.
Right.
So I was on another bike a week after.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a good perspective because we're not promised tomorrow,
Exactly.
And if you wake up every morning being thankful of just being alive another day, you're ahead of a lot of people. Being alive and healthy, you're ahead of many people. You have access to water, you have access to food, you're in a good position to live. And that's, more people need to look at it that way and just live that way. Live in such a way that makes you want more from life and stop wasting time on some of the stuff that don't matter. And I keep talking about COVID, but COVID has, you see a lot of the realities that we've been ignoring. COVID has allowed a lot of people to excel in some of the things that they do. They started reading more, they started doing more research, started learning new stuff, but it also made a lot of people lazy. And being conscious of the time you spend and what you're doing with that time is extremely important. As an entrepreneur, it's very important to know what you're doing with your time. Okay, so what is the most important time of the day for you as an entrepreneur, and how do you handle stress, and how do you get your mind off of the hustle?
It's a very good question. For me, the best time for me is the first 2 hours of the morning.
Okay.
And the reason why is I think before any given day that you start, you need to put yourself in a mental state before you undertake whatever is action, negotiation, problem-solving issues that you may have during that day.
Right.
So I think the first hour or two for me during a given day is really that calm time to reflect on how I want that day to unfold. So as anybody would have their weekly strategy, I think for me it's important to have that daily resourceful time thinking in the morning when you're having that cup of coffee, looking at your day's plan and strategizing how you're going to tackle everything.
You do that every morning?
I do that every morning.
Right.
It's like a sportsman we're in the change room.
Right.
They're talking, they're strategizing, they're putting the suit on.
So you talk to yourself a lot.
Exactly.
That's not crazy.
Yeah. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's sound
Yeah.
does talk to themselves once in a while.
Well, you need to have some sort of mental instability to work for yourself, because you're constantly trying to pick yourself up again and trying to just keep positivity, right? So to unwind, it was a stressful day. What do you do?
Again, I take a little bit of time to think. Sometimes it's, I may want to go for a run or for a bike ride or for whatever it is that would change my body's state. If it was sitting all day, I would like to maybe go do something different. If it was mind work all day, well, maybe I don't know. I'll try to play a video game or do something that will completely change how the chemistry in my mind. That
Yeah,
works
believe
that
it or
way.
not, video games it really works your mind. No matter what game you're playing, it's especially the new consoles. I haven't played the PS5 or the new Xbox yet, but I've played video games, and I played Madden, and it's so the strategies, and it really gets you thinking.
It does, and I'm by
like
no
you're-
means a big
yeah.
player of video games or whatsoever.
Yeah.
But it's such a good question where I do sometimes ask myself, I know how I'm feeling. I know I may be stressed. What is it? You exhaust so many of the options you have to go and find something else to do, right? Video games came
Yeah.
kind of unexpectedly for me to try and look there and say, hey, well, why don't I try that?
Yeah, everybody has a taboo,
Yeah.
right? Everybody has some unhealthy habit that they do to unwind. What is yours?
I'll probably go for a glass of scotch at the end of the day. I make it. I also created this thing called every other Friday business club, where the sole purpose is to be able to have enough drinks to be able to relax.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah. By the way, Mehdi is in the same office building as I am. That's where we met. And we kicked off with some really good conversations that I think it's beneficial for everybody to listen to, because we have talked about most of these things already.
Yeah.
This is very natural conversations. How many pharmacies are you guys working with now?
So currently, we're probably working up with upwards of 20 pharmacies or so in the Ottawa area.
Okay. That's pretty cool. And you've been advertising for what? Not even 8 months now.
No, it hasn't been 8 months. I mean, again, we really started live back in April 2020.
Okay.
And the funny part is, as you mentioned, COVID. Well, we started right at COVID.
Right.
Some people asked us, "Hey, was this planned to start at COVID?" Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, COVID, we had to re-strategize and we adapt to COVID as well. One of our approaches was to be always hands-on and face-to-face conversational with pharmacists. It's such an important part of the process in the pharmacy world. And we were, we faced the fact that we just couldn't.
What's the process? Like how many couriers do you have on the road?
So we have a few different, I think we have about maybe 4 or 5 different delivery drivers at this point.
And those are all subcontractors.
Exactly.
Okay. And you separate them per, I guess, region.
Exactly.
Okay. One thing that you talked about, I'm just going back to, getting yourself ready for the day. One thing that you talked about is is how you have to do things consistently, over and over again. The things that you do in the morning, right? Your job is not repetitive. You're constantly doing different things, right? And you are one of the decision makers at rxonwheels. You have a team. Someone's doing marketing. Someone's, you have someone handling the couriers. Whatever is going on in the back end. I want to know, where do you see RX on Wheels in 5 years? And do you try to look, is there a brand that you try to look up to that helps you with your vision of RX on Wheels?
It's a very good question. I never saw RX on Wheels as being a courier company. The reason why I've never seen it that way, because I feel that the mere completion of that service can be done by anybody. What really RX on Wheels is here to change is the pharmacist view of what is delivery going to represent for them 5 years from now.
Okay.
So what I think 5 years from now, RX on Wheels will be a partner that will allow pharmacies, or that will be able to help pharmacies keep their patients when bigger competitors are going to come in play.
Amazon is coming into play.
Exactly. So Amazon Pharmacy had the approval in the United States a few days ago. It's something that we saw come in. It's actually one of the reasons why I decided to launch rxonwheels is because these things were just going to come. It was a matter of time before they were going to come. Uber Pharmacy have filed for their trademarks years ago in Canada. So it was not a question of if, it was a question of when. Right. And when I look at the common independent community pharmacy out there, they're not currently equipped to be able to compete. 50% of the Canadian market is managed by corporate worlds. Yeah. So your Shoppers, your Walmarts. Yeah. And then you have a big 50% that's independent pharmacies. Yeah. So whatever is the total value of that industry, it's 50% of it that is at jeopardy when you have a big comer like Amazon Pharmacy come.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And I think one of the ways for them to prepare is to be able to accept that today delivery, for example.
That's really interesting.
Is no longer a value add for them to offer the patients. It's a cost of doing business. Right. And it's currently not seen as that.
Interesting. That's really 50%. That's a big number. What about brand?
One of my favorite brands of all time was always Apple. And the reason why is because they're unorthodox in their ways, but yet they got people to accept the way they do business, the way they present the products. Yeah. It was funny enough. I was watching an influencer's video a few days ago. He's like, well, Apple is one of those companies that will never tell you what the CPU or GPU capacity or the RAM capacity of the phone is. They will never talk about specs. They'll tell you that their batteries will last 10 hours, but then they'll never tell you what the milliamp hour in that battery is. And people don't necessarily care.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a beautiful phone. It's a beautiful product. It's a beautiful iPad. It's a beautiful computer. And if you read Steve Jobs' book by Walter Isaacson, you really go deep in the mind of Steve Jobs and what he wanted and the vision he wanted for Apple. And seeing it unfold on stage every time they announce a new product or they announce a new iPhone, it's fascinating. And I mean, Tim Cook he's probably the best successor to Steve Jobs because he feels it, They have such a beautiful creative mind that you can learn a lot from as an entrepreneur, right? Apple is one of my favorite brands too, by the way. I have an iPhone, iPad, MacBook Air, the Mac computer. I'm a huge fan. AirPods. What else is there? Yeah. Apple Watch.
Apple Watch, pretty much.
Like you've got it all. And it's almost like it's a culture. They've built a culture. And that's what you want as a brand. You want to build a culture around you. And you see that with a lot of different industries where people are so committed to that culture, to that brand, because they believe in it. And they don't only believe in the brand, but they also believe in the story behind the brand. They believe in the representative of that brand. It doesn't necessarily have to be the owner, but the representative of the brand. Even any of the luxury goods like Versace or Louis Vuitton, you see people on screen wearing them. You want to be like them, so you buy their product, and you're building that sort of culture around it. And every industry needs to adjust to sort of have that type of feel. And hopefully rxonwheels gets to that point because I'm cheering for you guys, and I love the concept, and I love the people behind it. It's great people. You have a wonderful team. I've met them all, and hopefully, you triple and quadruple by next year when we have this conversation again on this table.
On this table. Well, thank you, Ram.
Do you have any book recommendations for our wonderful audience?
One of my most favorite book is actually a book that was authored by a Navy SEAL. It's called Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
By Jocko Willink.
Yeah.
I think we're discussing about accountability.
Yeah.
Competitive spirit, but
he's
also
a bad man.
Exactly.
Jocko. Yeah, he is. Okay.
I think a lot of the premises and the basis of succeeding in entrepreneurship can be learned on a war field.
Okay. So that's by Jocko Willink. The name of the book is Extreme Ownership. And it talks about accountability.
Amongst
Other things.
Of course, amongst other things.
Awesome. I also want to recommend a book called The Compound Effect, and that's by Darren Hardy. It talks a lot about just doing this, not necessarily the same thing, but the things that work, the small things that you do every day to advance your business, to advance your life, and live a healthier and a better life, will essentially compound into something much bigger. Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have learned something about it as well, something from it at least. I'm trying to get a lot of entrepreneurs in here to talk about the things that we can do, the things that we do, and the things that have helped us get to where we are and get to where we want to be. I think looking at different brands, reading the right books, listening to the right people, and especially listening to people that are right here in Ottawa, at home, that can help you get there. We will leave some information on RX on Wheels. I'm sure Mehdi would love to take your calls and emails.
Of course.
And you know where to reach me. Thank you for watching. Oh, and that magic trick, it's just magic.